this week's episode. I'm really excited to be here. Today we have an amazing guest on the podcast, Ishara de Garis. She's my teacher and mentor, and I'm really excited to share her work and just learn even more from you. Welcome, Ishara.
Thank you for having me here today.
So lovely to have you here. And for anyone and everyone who's been following the podcast, know that I have a lot of different priestesses on and women who work somehow with the goddess. And I've also shared that I've been doing a priestess path this year that has passed, actually, focusing on goddess Ishtar. And I'm really excited today, Ishara, for you who started the Daughters of Ishtar Temple, how you got into that work. If people haven't seen you before or read about you, maybe you want to start by introducing yourself and how you came into this work.
Okay, so the very beginning, I was born in Perth, Western Australia, where I still live. My mother is English and my father was a Perth boy. And my parents were both quite religious in their youth when they met through their student Christian movement. And so when I was a child growing up, spirituality was something that was important in our family. But by the time I reached my teens, I was not sure if Christianity really resonated for me. And I was exploring, wanting to know, who am I? What am I on the planet about? And a burning question for me was, what does it mean to be a woman? And also, as a young teenager, how will I know when I've got there? So I was one of those girls who was just waiting to start bleeding. I was not an early menstruation person. In fact, my younger sister, who's 18 months younger than me, started bleeding before I did, which really I felt very indignant about at the time. So that was an area that was like of passionate interest to me. I always gravitated to the pregnant mums. As I was growing up, I would like hang out with anyone who had a baby, and that interest continued. My personal journey that led me into actually committing to my priestess path probably started in my teens with the question, really, who am I? What am I here for? And then I went on an interesting journey where I was strongly attracted to women, but the first person that I fell in love with who reciprocated my feelings was a man. And I had a strong conditioned script that if I was going to be sexual with someone, that it must mean that we were meant to be together forever. So I initiated us getting married. It wasn't an idea that he had at the time. And when we were very close to getting married, he got to this place. He said, before we go through with this wedding, I need you to understand something. I'm not ready to have children, and I don't know whether I will be, like when that might happen for me or whether it will. Now, he was 11 years older than me. I was 19 when I got into the relationship. He was significantly older than me and way more experienced, because I was still living at home with my parents, and he had moved out of home to go to university eons ago, had completed a postgraduate degree overseas, come back to Australia and taken up a teaching position, and we met on campus. Anyway, this is a long story, but the thing is, I was pre-programmed to want to be a mum, but I was also very committed to this relationship. So I just went, yeah, okay, I'm sure it'll all work out, and kept going. Unfortunately, what actually happened was that after we had our wedding, I got more and more strongly the desire to become a mum, and the more emotional I got about that, the more distressed he became, and the more he went, I can't do that with you, because it turned out he had a long history in his family that his mother had severe postnatal depression, and he was like everything falls apart when you have a baby, and I can't do that. So eventually I'm in this place where I'm married to a man who I love, who loves me, but does not want to have children, and I really want to. And I tried really hard to find a way to resolve that. It stretched me out of my conditioned script for how to be a good adult person. And I reached out anywhere for answers. So I went and had my first ever tarot reading in one of the markets. I went and saw a psychic. I found an astrologer who worked in a different way, experientially, where you put all the astrological symbols down in a circle on the ground and you step inside, and then you have an experience that's to do with interacting with those symbols and the energy that comes up in your being. And each time I did one of these things, it made me more and more aware that there was something really important for me about becoming a priestess. It was a thing that had been there in the background probably ever since I read The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. I'm sure she probably sparked that for many, many women, and which had got stronger as a young adult in my journaling and reading something by Starhawk. I did not first read her classic text that everyone reads, The Spiral Dance, but I read a book called Dreaming the Dark, Magic, Sex and Politics, and it's a smaller book. And as I was turning the pages, she was describing her worldview and her understanding of things. And each page I turned, I would have a moment of, whoa, that's how I feel about it. So by the end of the book, I closed the book and I went, well, that's what she believes. And she says she calls herself a pagan. So maybe I'm a pagan too. And my first kind of connection with the goddess was really in my own private world of imagining, in my journaling, in my dreams, and through contact with writings from people like Starhawk and some of those early women's spirituality writers who were just at that stage, in remote Perth, Western Australia, there was one shelf in the university bookshop that had women's studies, and on one corner of that were the women's spirituality books, and I found them and went, this is for me. So it had been there, but I had been kind of assuming that sometime or other some teacher would show up to show me how to do this. And what happened instead was that I was in this situation of being in a deep conflict in a marriage that I didn't see how to resolve. And when I went looking for answers about how and when am I going to have a baby, what came back to me was, when are you going to step up and do this priestess thing? And it culminated for me with an experience where I was driving to a friend's birthday party, and you might know, you might have had this experience yourself when you're doing something that you don't have to think too hard about, and you're in a kind of slightly trancey space, and suddenly these words popped into my head. It was like, wake up, when are you going to stop sitting around waiting for someone else to authorize you and just get on with it? And I kind of went, oh, you're talking to me. Okay, I better do something about this. So at that point I went, okay, I know I'm supposed to be a priestess. I don't really know what that means. I don't entirely know how to do it, but I have a sense that it's around holding ritual and ceremony, because I have, been walking through and alongside the whole Christian liturgical context, and I know what happens in church groups and so on. And I now also have a sense of that energy is a thing that flows through everything that's alive, and that humans can tap into that and consciously work with it. And one of the things that had disenchanted me about the church experience was that the guy standing at the front wearing the ceremonial robes didn't seem to realize that he could be like moving energy with this ritual that he was doing. That it wasn't just about, waving a few things around. There was actually an intention and some energy that could happen here. So I reached this place in my life as like, okay, are you going to do it? Doesn't matter that you don't know what or how, you just have to say yes. So I set a date, which I decided I needed to give myself 3 or 4 months, time enough to experience whatever was going to come up when I decided to make this commitment. And I invited some people who were close to me in my life at that time to come and be my witnesses. And I created my own small ceremony and dedicated myself as a priestess of the goddess and said, okay, I'm here, show me what you want me to do. And things kind of unfolded from there. So one of the things that happened was I had made the tough decision to end the marriage because it was clear to me that it was not going to work. It was making me really unhappy. It wasn't making him happy either. And so that was hard, but I did it. I met another man who at the beginning was also not sure he wanted to have children, but very quickly moved to a place of, yes, actually having a child together would be a magical thing to do. And so we did. And he also brought a lot of magic and understanding of the esoteric arts into my life, which I probably had been both reaching towards and a bit afraid of up to that point. But he was already in my bed being my lover before I discovered the full depths of what he was into. So it's the goddess snuck it in sideways. It's like, so I learned a lot from him in the short time that we were together. We had a beautiful child who's now an adult person living independently in Melbourne, and I don't have as much contact with, but it was such an important journey for me. Along the way, I did some intense spiritual work in a small group that was oriented towards our own flavor of maybe contemporary. It wasn't Wicca exactly because we did our own thing, but we followed a lot of those kinds of structures and processes. And we worked specifically with the seasons of our land here, which is a little different than Northern Europe. And we also worshipped the goddess at full moons and had the experience of drawing her down into the body of one of the people in the circle. Each month we would draw lots to see who was going to do that. And that was all amazing, an amazing experience. But as small groups do, it eventually kind of fragmented. And then I had a period of sitting going, okay, and now what? And that is when the Daughters of Ishtar work emerged. It was not something I set out to do. It's something that found me. And over the years, the original inspiration that came through, I have attempted to ground some of that in a series of ceremonies celebrating the solstices and equinoxes and the places in between. So it works on a similar calendar to the Celtic Wheel of the Year, but it's a different mythological system, a different set of energies that we work with. Okay, that was a long answer.
Well, that was great to hear again the story and the path and what comes up for me. And maybe some people will ask because the goddess has so many different faces and we can work with her in different phases of our lives and in like there's so many ways and we feel probably called to different things. But how did like Ishtar and that particular form of the goddess come to you?
Yes, it's a good question. Initially, I don't think I used any particular name to call the goddess. I just thought of her as the goddess, and she was kind of nameless and ancient. But as time went on, I kind of had a sense of affinity more with Inanna than I did with the Egyptian Isis, and I met people who were devout worshippers of Isis, and I just went, I can see what you've got happening, but I don't have that in my heart. And then I was in a I was part of a little group doing a connecting with spirit through a Ouija board, which was something that my partner at the time was very good at facilitating. So if he was on the board, you would get real strong contact with entities that were kind of trying to guide us and help us move forward. And they would throw things in that were just designed to stir it up. So you asked a question, you would get an answer. It was a little bit slow because it was the old moving the cup around on the board to spell out words and things. And eventually my partner kind of progressed from there to a place where he would do full voice channeling, and it was much smoother. But back then we were on the Ouija board, and I don't even remember what the conversation was, but something came up about this goddess work and the sense of connection to the old temples. And I think I had been asking why it was that I had, even though I was really drawn into this work and it was definitely my commitment, why there were still parts of me that were really quite frightened of stepping back into the temple. And so we had a bit of a conversation about that there might have been a couple of past life traumas that were still kind of working themselves out in this lifetime, or one to do with one of those ancient Inanna temples, and the life that it was connected to was, you know, in some way responsible for the well-being of a whole bunch of women in this temple at a time when it was ransacked by an invading army. So it was a messy situation. I wouldn't say that was my life, but it's definitely a life that has an influence on this life that I'm in the middle of now. So when the word Ishtar came up, I was a little bit like, well, why Ishtar? Why not Inanna? And so I had that conversation with this being that was talking to us, and the feedback was essentially, well, Ishtar was, the worship of Ishtar was quite widespread, especially in her astral form. So when she's associated with the star, that she was really a preeminent name of the goddess in that whole ancient Near East for at least 3 millennia. So she had a very solid presence in the known world at the time, and tended to absorb other minor deities into herself. So I think that I've been reading snippets of scholarly work about some of this from time to time, and one thing that I was looking at earlier was saying that because she's so complex and has connections in different parts with different names, and that it makes it very difficult for scholars to go, this is Ishtar, this bit here this is what she is. And so at the time I was like, well, okay, but maybe Ishtar could be a name that I could work with. When the first rush of inspiration for the Daughters of Ishtar came, I was, I think, a little bit like, well, why Ishtar? You know, why not some other name? Why Ishtar? And I had another one of those moments, which haven't happened very often in my life, of feeling like an answer came directly into my consciousness. And it was, oh, I'm getting shivers as I think about it. She said loudly in my mind, why not me? I mean, I thought, here I am in Perth, Western Australia, a long way from all of that. I have no Middle Eastern heritage in this lifetime. So I was kind of going, well, why Ishtar? But these days, I believe that different goddesses actually choose us rather than the other way around. So if you're listening to this and there's something for you in that name, or you're kind of thinking, well, you know, I don't know, is that for me? I think if you ask, you will get an answer.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it comes when we're not seeking it, because I feel like your your path into it was so different than, for example, mine, where, yeah, definitely I was not in. I probably never heard about priestessing and things like that, but Ishtar came to me in a vision and said her name, and I didn't know so much, but then I had the roots from these areas where she was worshipped. So it's really interesting, and in different times of life, because she also comes when we need to have her presence there in different forms, right? So it's really interesting to hear your path and your calling and what you have worked with. And it was just a perfect match when I found you, because I was really actively looking for, when I felt like I was ready to do a priestess training, I was actively wanting to find you. And it took a while. It actually took,
Yes.
I was like very much searching for a long time before I found this, and it felt so right. And then, yeah, we have another sister in the training as well that I'm very close to, and Ishtar had come to her as well. So it's really connected, and we can trust that. And I feel also that the year of being in training with her is also like a healing year, and a year of really connecting back to ourselves and our evolution, which means that even if you enter the temple, it's also a lot like you're priestessing for yourself, like having a deeper connection with the goddess. It's a devotional, like you dedicate time and energy into it, but you have so much that comes back even when it's tough. So I'm really excited. But I wanted to ask, so the Daughters of Ishtar temple now is a space where women can actually meet online, because you've worked a lot locally in Australia, but now also, as we started last year for the Northern Hemisphere, the fall equinox, which is in September, that starts a new cycle. And maybe people would love to know, like, what we have. I mean, I can answer that too, but I want, when it comes from you, like this path that we walk in the temple, how that looks, because maybe some women who are listening now know about the Celtic wheel of the year, know those points, because that's nature points. It
Yes.
happens wherever, right? And
Yes.
but what type of evolution that we follow when we're working with the goddess?
Yes. Okay. So the impulse for Daughters of Ishtar is very much about restoring sacredness to our embodied experiences. So we're about healing that rift between spirit and body that the Western culture has kind of inherited, I suppose. And because we're talking about female embodiment in particular, I mean, I've always been drawn to work with women, and that's the aspect of this temple work that I hold. I'm sure there is more. And if we have many priestesses, there will be many forms in which this work can unfold. My dream is that one day there's a dedicated spaces where priestesses and anyone who's drawn to serve the goddess and can hold space not only for women but for all gender experiences to have that deep connection with the sacred feminine. Well, for starting, like the work for me now, and maybe this is this particular lifetime for me, is about holding space for women to come back to a sense that we do embody the goddess, that is who we are. And however that unfolds in our lifetime, that there are special moments where there's an opportunity really to see all the blessing that's in there, because I know not every woman relates to being a woman as a sense of blessing in her life. It's not every lineage or a family has experienced being womanhood as being a blessing. In some contexts, it's been a challenge or a trauma of some sort. So this is about holding a healing space, not just for individual women, but for us collectively as women together, so that the healing can then flow out and change culture and transform our relationship with the earth, with the land as well, hopefully. So in the temple space, it's like in the year, the sun goes through all those seasons. We go around the sun, but from our earth perspective, it's like the sun goes around us in a big wheel. And so in the temple, it's like we're standing in the middle, and the seasons unfold around us. So we move from one altar to the next at each seasonal moment, and we start at the autumn equinox. Usually that's like, there is, in a circle, there's no beginning or end, so you could start anywhere, but the place where I like to start the journey with women who want to have the full experience is often at the autumn equinox, because this is the moment in the year when we celebrate the mystery of conception, which is an obvious beginning. So in order for conception to occur, there has to be a willingness to be open, to be transformed by the power of love. Essentially, we have to be willing to open ourselves and have this intimate union with another being, so that new life can spark, can start. And then all of us were conceived, so we all can connect back to our own moment of conception and all the soul impulses that came into this world at that time. And then for those of us that have had the blessing of becoming a mother, we can also connect with that moment of conceiving. And when I say that, I'm aware that there is always a shadow to everything. So with each of these mystery points, there is the experience of stepping forward into more apparent abundant life, but there's also the death side of things. And so for some people, there will be points in this temple cycle which are particularly poignant for them, and an opportunity to bring some healing to something that isn't yet resolved for them in this life. So for some people, this place is where you pray for the baby that you're wanting to be open to bring into the world. For some, it's a place of grieving and healing a pregnancy that didn't come to term in whatever way. We have our different connections with it, but in all of it, it comes back to being present in our bodies and opening to the fullness of what that can be, which for conception to happen is a complete openness to pleasure and desire and the surrender into all of that. So I don't know, is that making sense, Shireen? I know this stuff. I know this stuff so well, but sometimes to articulate it for other people is challenging. It's like, come into the temple and have the experience, and then you'll know for yourself what it is that it means for you.
Exactly. And I mean, we have all been conceived at one time, and even the world has been conceived. So we can experience that particular point in time in different ways, maybe each year in different ways, and see like what will merge together, because there's like an emergence that happens, a union. So that's what I feel like is very strong for many people. Yeah.
And that also reminds me that as much as it is about our physical lives, it's also about our spiritual, imaginative and creative lives. And so, you know, as we work strongly with this cycle of embodiment, we're also having the opportunity to open to something that wants to manifest in the world through us. And that could be anything. There's any number of different ways that spiritual impulses can manifest in the world. They don't have to be physical beings. It might be a creative project. It might be a kind of service that wants to come into the world, or a message, who knows, but whatever it is, something wants to come down through us. And in the autumn equinox conception mystery ceremony, we have the opportunity to consciously open to a new cycle of co-creation. So then we move from the conception mystery. The next moment in our cycle is the point between the equinox and the winter solstice, which is the mystery of flesh. It is when we celebrate that gestation of the new thing. It's not yet visible. It's taking shape, but it's still hidden in the womb space. And we have, again, the opportunity to connect with our own experience of being in the womb space, and also to experience that in a kind of more cosmic experience of being, of us all being constantly dwelling within the womb of the Great Mother, essentially. And as the different parts of spirit and embodiment come together, we also honor our ancestors, because they give us the gift through the DNA code of being able to actually have a physical body, which we wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah. And all of this, which I'm telling you now, Shireen, I'm going to go into in some more depth when we do our introductory session on Sunday. So I'm hoping that if you're interested and I've whetted your appetite, I can kind of give you a quick tour now, but we'll go into it in some more depth on Sunday for anyone who would like to join us.
Exactly. This Sunday, it's the 21st of August. We're gonna have a live session, so I'll share that in the links in the show notes, and probably it will be recorded if someone wants to access it afterwards as well, because we're starting a new cycle in a month, a new priestess path, a new priestess training for anyone who is interested, and I can highly recommend it. But yeah, we can move through this cycle of our journey, as you said, briefly now, and then we go deeper into it in a few days.
Yes. So just continuing on, so we've done conception and now gestation and the mystery of quickening, as we call it, when which is like the moment when the mother can feel the new life moving inside her. We still haven't met this being on the outside yet, but we have a sense of them starting to take shape. At winter solstice, we celebrate the birthing mystery and how that kind of opens everything, opens us inside out nearly, in order for this new thing to come fully into the world. All of us have been born. Some of us have had the experience of giving birth or being present and supporting others to give birth, and that is an amazing blessing if you've had that opportunity. And if you haven't, you can come into the temple and you can get a taste of what that energy is actually like as we invoke it and go deeper into it, as Shireen and Anna did in their own way as part of their training cycle. And then we move from winter solstice to the place that's halfway between winter solstice and spring equinox. And this one is the breath mystery. So our first breath brings us into independent life. We all celebrate, the baby breathes and is going to live. And at the same time, with that first breath, we breathe in the air that has been shared and recycled through countless living beings on the planet, and we become kind of part of this communion that is the breath. And in the breath mystery as well, connect to, it's like, on the one hand, yes, here we are now as an individual human being who's kind of separate from mum, beginning to develop into our own selves, beginning, obviously, but at the same time, we also celebrate that as humans, our consciousness is not limited to being in this body. We also can have an expanded experience of going to the stars in our spirit beings. So all of that. So with the first breath, we're moving more into the light, and at spring equinox, which is like the dawn of the day, we celebrate the mystery of that in arms phase, when mother and baby are together and nursing, and the mutual gaze between mum and baby, and the mystery of breasts and breast milk, and just the whole flow of nurture and how that actually happens, because if it didn't, there wouldn't be humans on the planet today. So so that's the spring equinox, and we continue to grow and mature, and at some point we get to this next place, which is the mystery of blood, as we grow from girls into budding into womanhood, and we celebrate the first blood, and connect with our first experience of menstruation, but also the way that after nursing our babies, at some point our cycles reassert themselves, we begin to bleed again, and we begin to create some space, some separation between ourselves and this being that we've been totally absorbed in being a life support system for up until now. And that, again, this is not, it's not a, there's not an equal amount of time in between these things. As we move through this cycle, it accelerates. And isn't that life? As I sit here at my age now, I think, yes, time accelerates. The older you get, the faster everything goes. So from the blood mystery, we move to the summer solstice, and we celebrate the aspect of Ishtar as Queen of Heaven. We celebrate her full solar radiance and step into our own maturity, our own light, I suppose, as sovereign beings in our own lives, and that's a beautiful celebration. And then, because we need to move beyond being like, it's wonderful to have a self and important and everything, and yet for new life to happen somehow, we have to move back to that place of complete surrender again. And the way that we do that is by moving through the mystery of desire. And so desire calls us to step beyond our known. It touches something inside of us that yearns for something more, for deep connection with something other than ourselves. And then this opens the way to the next moment of conception. So that's a very quick tour.
I think that's very beautiful, and it also shifts a little bit the focus from like the worldly and what's happening in nature, which we connect because it's our cycle as well. But I feel like going through all of those points, each point has been healing on different levels, because we can connect to all points, even if the conception means the conception of projects, new ideas, things like that, for example, or a conception of a new healing path. It's really meant for everyone, no matter our physical experience or no matter where we are in the world and what connection we have. So I really appreciate that our path is really the embodiment of the different phases of the goddess. And what I also really love is that in our practice, we call in very different aspects of her, of Ishtar, as the cosmic mother, the earth, the womb, the heart, the foremothers, the ancestral lineage. So there's so much to it, and I think that for anyone who is really wanting to deepen the connection with yourself and with the goddess, this is a great path to take, and very allowing. And I mean, I feel like our training really was intimate and very beautiful, and the time does go fast, and I feel like the year went by so quickly, but we're really excited to have the initiation and to continue. We will continue having like local circles here in Sweden. And I'm wondering also, you touched upon, so ceremony and rituals are really important.
Yes.
It's like that's how the relationship and the connection starts. I want to also share that for each ceremony and ritual that we've done, different things have come up, and no ceremony is the same. And some ceremonies have been very, for me, like transcendental and really like downloading a lot of things, and visions and communion, and some have been like more physical and some have been more emotional. So it's on different, but what is the different ceremonies and rituals? What is the essence behind them? Maybe if someone is wondering what it means. And
what kind of ceremonies are we talking about? Yeah. So because it is our temple tradition, our ceremonies are mostly done indoors. That's my preference, because it's a contained space and private, and you can build the energies, and have altars with all kinds of things on them without worrying about anything getting rained on or knocked over by the wind. So there is beauty in working outdoors, and I have done some of that, but these ceremonies are usually held indoors. The ceremony is not exactly a scripted ceremony. Like if you went to a Christian church, there's a whole liturgy of, the priest reads this and the congregation read this, and then we sing this. I do have a scripted ceremony, which we do sometimes as a healing ceremony, but these ceremonies, it's about opening sacred space and then bringing in all the energy that connects with this particular mystery point that we're celebrating. And whether we do that through words, through music, through what we place on the altar, or through some kind of symbolic gesture that we might do together or individually. The intention is really just to open this field of energy so that you can go into it and have the experience that you need to have, and be open to some communication from the goddess about whatever it is. You can take your questions to her and get a sense of an answer. They're definitely devotional in nature, so it is about a space for just celebrating and worshipping the divine feminine. And although we do it under the blessings of Ishtar, it is a very universalist kind of approach, so every aspect of the feminine is welcome in the temple, essentially. So do you think that gives some impression of what these ceremonies are like?
Yeah, and I would recommend anyone, if you want to experience it, it's all about setting the intention, opening up, inviting in, receiving, giving, connecting with different important parts of life, finding that inner creativity somehow, like deepening your senses as well, and connecting with your higher senses. So I think it's like working on all different levels, because it's so many aspects to it, and then just feeling and meditating with that. I think that's really it's beautiful to join in on that. And so if anyone is interested in the priestess path, priestess training, maybe you can just shortly explain how it's structured. I mean, I can also do it.
I can talk a little bit about this. So from near the beginning, I guess I had a sense that there were a series of initiations that would take us deeper into the priestess embodiment in this lifetime. And the first one is a ceremony to awaken Ishtar within your being and bring her energy up through you. And in order to receive this initiation, it's like beautiful to have experienced the full cycle of ceremonies in the temple. So when Shireen contacted me and said, do you do priestess initiations? I said, well, I can, but you're in Sweden, I'm in Perth, so we have to work out how to do this. And for me, the physical being in the temple is really important. So it was a challenge to see how can I share this with people who are on the other side of the planet in a way they can have the experience they need to have. And I think the way that we have worked with it this year is something that is very repeatable. So it will be slightly different with different women because it will respond to whoever's in the group and what their needs are. But essentially, what we will do is I will do some teaching to have a basic idea of how this whole thing hangs together. I will teach some practices for opening the sacred space, and you will gradually create your 4 altars. So as we reach an altar, then you will learn more about that aspect of Ishtar and create your own altar to celebrate her. And then I will guide you through a process of doing your own ceremony. Now, if you're lucky enough, like Sharina and Anna, to have a buddy who's close enough that you can get together with them and do the ceremonies together, that is absolutely wonderful. But I know that's not always possible. So if you are the brave soul who feels called to do this, and you know that this is something you're here for, and you really want, and you can see how it might complement the skills that you've already gathered, or open the door for you to go and gather new skills to complement what we do in the temple space. Doing this year together will bring you to a place where you are feeling like you could maybe step into holding that space for other women in your local community. That's my intention, really, to seed this possibility for people so they can then see how they want to share that locally and connect with other women in the ceremony space in physical. So for that reason, I'm not proposing to do online ceremonies. What we will do is we'll have a mentoring circle. You'll get some guidance about how to set up your space and what to do in the space. And for the first one, we'll probably do as I did last year, where I basically pre-record me doing all the invocations and instructions so you can turn on the sound and just follow the guidance. And then as the year goes on, you'll build your own confidence to hold that space for yourself a little more. So after each ceremony, we'll also debrief, so you can talk about what happened for you, and we can talk through anything that came up for you. And maybe there'll be some more suggestions about what else is good to do as a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And in between the ceremonies, we had some like journaling practices, art practices, like brainstorming, but also like tuning into different energies. So there's things happening in between that lead up to the next one, and then everything ties together. So it's really, I mean, we get so many tools to work with this energy, and then the ceremony is like the highlights, and each ceremony is different. So it's really interesting that way. And I really love building the altars and connecting with that energy and the different portal guardians. And yeah, a lot of the interesting stuff has happened through the ceremonies as well. So I can really recommend that. And we will also be there to support. And I'm really happy that we did this episode together, that we could share this. And I really highly recommend everyone who's wanting to connect deeper. It's a really great program, very affordable, very easy to follow, and gives so much. So thank you so much, Ishara, for sharing. If you don't have anything else you would like to share right now.
No, really, just I mean, you can tell that I love talking about this work. It's in my heart, and I love to share it with other people. So if this has sparked questions for you, please come on Sunday or get in contact through our Facebook page, and I'm very happy to have a further conversation and answer specific questions you might have.
Yeah, definitely. I'll share the links, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and the website I will also link to. And
Yes.
the program starts in a month, so there's enough time to answer questions and things like connect with me if you have any questions. And thank you so much again, Ishara, for coming on and sharing everything. Thank you.